This is week 2, apparently, of a series on series, because I have got another one next week. I don't think I've got any after that scheduled. I will give everyone a rest, don't worry. But today we're talking about Finding Alice, and this is one of those that I think was pitched wrongly. How it's described and what drew us into it is, woman's partner dies, big secrets come out. That sounds potentially thrillery. What did he do? I mean, there's human drama going to be in there if it was like affairs and things like that, but it didn't sound like someone just dealing with the grief. That's really what it is. The secret is he gave his house, in the event of his death, his house would go to his parents, but he's not married to Alice, his partner, so that causes a lot of issues. And then he's got a secret son. There's all these kind of things that come out of the woodwork, but nothing makes it sound like that should be the focus. The focus is very much on how Alice and those around her deal with grief. But this has such a great cast. We have Keely Hawes as Alice herself, Nigel Havers, we've got Joanna Lumley, Kenneth Branagh, who is one of those, I'm sure I said Cranham, is one of those big hitters. He's been in so many things that I can't even list. He is a very well respected British actor. So many people here do really good, but then some of the less known, we have Isabella Papas, who I've never seen in anything else before, and she does well as Charlotte. So they really did well in the casting of this. And one of the things that annoys me about this is the end is very much a cliffhanger. It has this moment of like, is she going to use this frozen sperm that was left to her to have another baby? This decision's been part of the last sort of couple of episodes. Maybe she's going to do it. Maybe we'll find out in the season 2, apart from the fact that that was planned, but then that didn't happen because of things like availability. I don't think there was anything other than that. It was Keely Hawes mainly wasn't available when they wanted to do it. Rather than rescheduling, they just said, no, we won't bother then. Which is a bit of a drop to me, but hey-ho. I don't make the decisions, unfortunately. But the main reason I wanted to talk about this, whilst that story and the family dynamics of everyone both sort of coming together in some ways, but also fracturing, as happens in real-life grief, that's really the focus for me, like the grief and how it deals with how that affects people. Obviously, we're mainly focusing on Alice and Charlotte because Alice is the title character. But everyone shows some element of grief. There are people who, seek connection straight away. They don't want to be alone. There are people who want to hide away. There are people who turn to substances, whether legal or non-legal. Everyone deals with grief in their own way, some healthy, some not. And that is definitely shown here. I mean, with Minnie and Jerry, Harry's parents, they have lost their son. And it always brings me back to the Two Towers. No parent should have to bury their child. I've said before, I'm sure, that humanity, and all animals really, if you think about it, we're designed to be orphans. At some point, our parents should die. And we live on. Hopefully the later the better, I will temper it with that. But it is one of those things, it's a natural part of life. Losing your parents is a kind of rite of passage to really say that, yes, I have lived long enough that that's happened. It's kind of like a mark of honour in a way. But it's never pleasant, obviously. We although some cultures have very different approaches to death. I'm talking from a Western perspective, of course. I do want to quickly stress that. But it is very emotionally fraught, those times. And like I say, people either come together, drift apart, or do whatever they need to at the time. And I think how the production team handled this was very well done. They'd obviously looked into death and grief and things like that. They got some of the things right. There's a moment where Alice talks about the Kubler-Ross model, the whole 7 stages, all that. And I sat there and just looked at my partner. I decided I wouldn't go into my tirade because there's lots of problems with it. I mean, I could do a whole video on that, but I'm not going to. The basic version is, it's out of date for one. It's stolen, I believe, if I remember rightly. And it's often misused in pop culture, for example, as well. That's not necessarily the problem with the model, that's the problem with the application. But it's not designed for the bereaved. It is designed for the people who are, well, originally it was terminal illness. It's like you now have this diagnosis. You will go through denial, anger, acceptance, grief, all that. All of that process to process this new information. It's not designed for the people left behind. But around 26 years ago now, God, that makes me feel old, let alone them probably, Stroebe and Schut came up with their model, which was a dual process. And there are 2 sides to it. We have the loss-oriented, which is where you're focusing on the departed, and your emotions, the handling of that, the processing of that loss. And then you have the restoration-oriented side. And that's more focused on, right, death certificate needs doing, funeral arrangements, all the practical things, dealing with the estate. And in typical healthy grieving, because obviously everyone is different, but in typical healthy grieving, the idea is that you will oscillate between. So maybe you'll do some reminiscing, you maybe look at some photos, deal with the emotions, but then you'll be like, right, now I've got to get this done. You'll phone the funeral directors, whatever it might be. And if you need assistance through grief counselling, the role of a grief counsellor is really to guide you through those if they do that kind of model. But a lot of people find it easy to focus on one or the other, and Alice is very much like me. Very much on the practical, not really wanting to deal with the emotional until I know everything's sorted. And for some, that is right. I don't think if I'd have flitted between, I'd have felt like I did it properly. I think I needed to kind of be practical first before moving into the emotional. But like I say, the fact that they don't really talk about this model is one of the downsides, because it had been out for 20-ish years by the time that they did this. So, but it's one of those, the general public is still sadly aware of Kubler-Ross as the main thing. So people use it as an easy shorthand to go, oh, this person's talking about grief. But that's really why I love this series. It does a very respectful and proper handling of grief. Even if it doesn't use the right terminology necessarily, we do still see elements of that. Some people are literally, like with Minnie and Jerry, they are closed down. They're just like, look, the house is ours. We don't want to be processing this anymore. It's too much. Just deal with it. Go and live somewhere else. It sounds really harsh, but it's how they've had to move forward. But part of watching this gave me an insight into one of the actors, and I was absolutely floored by them. I'd never seen him in anything before. I'd seen pictures of them associated with different productions, and that's Sharon Rooney. Now, my partner had seen My Mad Fat Diary, and that's what next week's going to be about, because that's interesting from a different angle of the mental health, like ED, belonging, depression. So it's very much, I feel that these two do link together, not only through Sharon, but through those sort of thematic, I get to talk a bit about psychology stuff before I start back. So I hope you'll join me for that and everything else coming down the line, due to start uni again soon. But until then, as always, thank you for watching, take care, and remember to grieve in your own way.